Hi, I'm Julia Adolph, and welcome to LooseLeaf NoteBook. Today I am joined by composer Andrew Norman. Andrew's music is performed by major orchestras around the world. He has twice been a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize and has received the prestigious Grawemeyer Award, Berlin Prize, Rome Prize, and Guggenheim Fellowship, just to name a few. Andrew shares how his anxiety has led to a significant period of writer's block. Together, we discuss some of the underlying sources of his anxiety and brainstorm together how he can move forward and reconnect with the joyful part of his creative process. This episode of LooseLeaf Notebook is supported by New Music USA and featured on NewMusicBox. Hi,
Hi, how are you?
Andrew. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And it's actually snowing right now. I don't know if it's doing that in
Yeah.
Nashville, but quite lovely.
So I've heard you speak a lot about how you love capturing this kind of chaos of modern technology and how our minds are sort of constantly being bombarded by different imagery, like lots of quick change in attention span, and how kind of our minds work differently now than they used to. When I've heard you speak about that, it actually reminds me of how my mind works when I'm in a highly anxious state. And I often use technology as kind of a metaphor for my own experience of just being highly overstimulated with anxiety. So I was just curious, is that something that you can identify with or that you've thought about in a conscious way? Or am I just projecting my own my, my own psychology onto you?
Which is of course totally okay. To bring our own experiences to any work of art is like the beauty of putting yourself out in the world. So I think that there for me is like this fine line between like the kind of euphoria of the bombardment and the joy of that, and then the anxiety and the kind of the negative sides of feeling totally unmoored or untethered. I feel like sometimes when I go to that space or want to go to that space in my music, I'm not entirely sure which side of that very fine line I'm coming down on. And I find also that people bring very different reactions to it as well. Like sometimes I think that I'm going for something that is a little bit more joyful and playful, and other people see it as entrapping and kind of suffocating. I am reminded when you are speaking about how this music reminds you of your own brain. I do have intense feelings of anxiety, especially when I'm starting a project. And I have gone through many periods in my creative life when the audience and composer interface feels very fraught to me. And that music, like the music that's in play and pieces like it, often comes from me like holding back or being unable to write anything because I have a lot of anxiety about how I behave in that space or how my music behaves in that space. So I hold back and hold back, and then something breaks and I just go. It feels like me trying, like just letting a zillion things out of my head, and trying just like letting it all out in this like tidal wave of chaos and ideas. And so that I think that that's part of where that music comes from for me. Is there's always like there is like this high degree of anxiety, and then at a certain point it's like something triggers a release and that all goes out there. But there's also this element of, and I'm trying to get better at it, but of me feeling very uncomfortable or deeply unsure about how to put work in that space in particular, the symphony orchestra space,
Sure.
which is like where I like where I basically work. And I think there was a sense that I developed this kind of language of this frenetic language, which is a little bit like I picture myself like dancing like really fast and uncontrollably in front of people, because it's like, well, I have to like keep entertaining and throwing them out, and like it's almost like I'm put some space where I don't belong, and my way of coping with that is I mean, that's an honest like it's an honest picture of my mental energies in that moment and feeling. And oftentimes what the pieces do then is they have to work through that till they find some other kind of space.
Do you have a sense, or do you want to share where this anxiety comes from, in your personal life, maybe pre Andrew in the music world?
Well, I mean, as a person growing up, I think I've always felt, let's see, how do I say this? I've always been acutely aware of the ways I don't belong, basically, and
The
like
ways you don't what?
belong.
The ways you don't belong.
And like I've always, and since I was a child, kind of like fixated on these things. I always, even when I was young, I felt like I was always triangulating out of like figuring out what other people believed and thought and valued. And but I always felt like keenly aware of the ways that I was different, but then also feeling that I should uh, minimize or hide those things. My father's an evangelical minister, um, and I grew up in a very very loving and supportive home, but the community around me at a certain point became very clear to me that I was gay, and they were not into that or just not even exposed to that really. But that was something I held on to as a kid and a teenager, and I think deeply impacted my sort of way of interfacing with the world, because when you, even at that very kind of deep level, you just always feel like you're not honest, and you're also deeply distrustful of your own instincts and your own feelings. And so that even as like an artist growing up and then being out in the world now for so long, I still have a tendency to distrust my own self. And my guess is most all of us, or all of us, feel some version of this, of like how to be the truthful, honest self out in the world. And as a composer, that's always, I think, for me, like the big question, like, well, like, what is my honest self? There is a sense that when you're a younger composer, you have to define yourself a little bit, and or the world will do it for you, so you better do it yourself. And it's not easy.
Right.
And it's a very complicated personal question.
Do you identify as somebody who experiences anxiety, like with a capital A, whatever that means, or have you tried therapy or ever had some kind of diagnosis, evaluation in your life?
I would say that yes, I definitely had anxiety with a capital A. Um, and I wouldn't I don't know that I would say that in recent years that I've had the kind of capital A anxiety. So I've gone, like, since I was a teenager, I've gone through cycles, and that's also like, this is um part of my emotional life. It's part of my creative life, where I go through periods where I am productive and healthier, and then I go through periods where I am not productive and not super healthy mentally. And when you're in this darker period, it's really hard to tell what caused it and what will cause you to get out of it. But so I went through a couple of those cycles in my 20s. And then at the end of my 20s, when I was back in school, I had like a really bad one. And I had therapy then, and I had medication for a little bit. It was also like I was trying to sort out my personal life, and uh, trying to figure out how to basically how to be out in the world. It was not very easy for me, and it all kind of came together. I had a period of being medicated, and um, luckily, like, I think the worst of it was over then. I still struggle with being a good composer and writing and being productive, uh, and I actually am going through a huge period right now of creative difficulty. Though my the rest of my life is amazing and really really joyful. So I did that. That was about 10 years ago when I had that bout, and yeah, I've had dark and stressful times in my work since, and I actually this current one that I'm in has really been a couple years going now, and so it's quite long. It actually started before the pandemic, and I just it's like I wanted to take a moment and reflect and make sure that I was making the work that I wanted to make. And suddenly, this moment, these questions just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then suddenly, it's 2 years later, and I find myself very far away from like putting notes on a page.
Do you talk about these big questions with anybody? Like with your husband or other composers?
You know, I not as much as I should for real. And I think that is, I mean, if there's anything I can say is to people, it's just make sure you have people you can talk to and talk to and talk to. And um, I do talk to people, but I wouldn't say that my creative life is filled with instances of me talking about my creative anxiety with other people or my creative troubles. And I think that I am, if I'm to be completely honest, I still feel like I'm a bit ashamed
Yeah.
of that, and um, don't like going there, especially when you're like I am, and you're going on multiple years of not producing music. Um, then it's like, well, all the people who I had this conversation with, I've had it with like 18 months ago. And how to keep that going is, or it, keep engaged with people is hard. So I'm really appreciative of this. Thank you for having me. I feel like I'm doing it in public, but that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
that's okay. So yeah, if for anyone out there, just find people that you can talk to all the time. And you know, I have a couple of composing friends who generally keep it a little bit on the lighter side, but I struggle. Like on top of my actual issues of my creative issues, there's also these like shame issues of like, composer, I can't write music, I'm being a waste of the world, I'm wasting everything. Uh, and I've been given so much and I can't do anything, and it just compounds itself in a bad way. So yeah.
Well, and you have the extra pressure of everyone else in the world seeing you as an enormous success. So what's Andrew's definition of success?
My definition of success is walking into this room every day and feeling empowered to write music, and feeling able, and feeling like I am following my creativity and figuring things out and actually writing. When that happens, it's like, it's amazing. That's why we do this. Like, uh, it is its own euphoric feeling, and like that's my definition of success. And like doing that every day, like getting
Yeah.
up, getting the kids up and out, and then getting here and being of a clear mind and doing it. But it's been years since that happened with any regularity. I mean, I wrote a couple small things in the pandemic, like little solo things for friends, but like these gigantic, kind of like big orchestral, these the kind of projects that you do they're so consuming. But that to me is like finding that on a daily basis. That's my version of success. And by that account, I'm a terrible failure. So
I started working with a creative coach,
nice.
and this is the first time in my life I've been able to write every single day. And it's incredible. But before that, I used to just procrastinate to no end. And it's hard to explain to another person. I've found why it is so hard to just sit down and just turn on the keyboard, get out your paper. So I guess maybe I'll try asking you this impossible question. I mean, it's hard to convey. I think for me, the anxiety is, it can be so debilitating that I can't even get in the room. Like, I'm not even in the room. I'm doing the dishes. I'm doing, the cleaning. I'm answering my emails. I'm doing whatever else other than facing the page. So what is hard for you in that sort of getting started?
Yeah. Well, first, I agree completely that it is the hardest thing. For me, I will do anything. I literally do anything other than compose most of the time. And I have very significant negative voices that have told me for so long that I'm not no good, like negative internal voices that are telling me that I'm not good, that like I know. I get what you mean. I even like on a day like today when I've had nothing to do but compose, I've turned that keyboard on maybe twice and I'll go over and I'll be like, oh, that's crap. Never mind. Absolute crap. And then I'm like so I think this is what like I'm so quick to like anytime I have any kind of creative thought or creative impulse, I also have like an equally strong and most of the time stronger negative impulse to that same thing. Like so, it's like I have kind of self-canceling impulses as a creator, and that's I think that I've gone through that feeling so many times that I like know what it is in advance, and that's why I have a hard time actually doing it because I know I'm just gonna cancel it. That for me is like it's a really hard cycle to break of like, well, I know whatever I do will not be good enough. So I'm not even going to do anything. Like orchestral music definitely suffers from like masterpiece syndrome of like, it has to be a masterpiece. Like it does. That's what that space demands. Like I tell myself really horrible, stupid things. Like this has to be the best thing you've ever written. This has to be like worthy of these amazing people who are gonna play it and these people who are gonna listen to it and like um so that like again it's like this it's the cycle and like I get to the point where it's like I can't even engage in that hamster wheel
It's
so
exhausting too.
exhausting. It is
It's exhausting.
exhausting. Yeah, there's definitely a fatalist sort of part of me that knows I'm gonna fail, so I'm not even gonna try every day, and that's upsetting. And like at this point, like I said, I started asking all these big questions, me and my work, and then suddenly I'm so far away from like the joy of making sounds and putting them on a page that I don't even know how to get those muscles working anymore. If any of my students are listening, don't get to this spot. Right? Don't do it.
It's hard though, and I mean, you have two little kids now.
Yeah.
Is that part of what's been on your mind these past couple of years? Your newborns?
Yes, I mean, how can it not be? But and they are. It's true that everything. As soon as the first one, Gustav, came along, everything took twice as long in my life. It's just how it was. And I no longer had, if I wanted to before, I had the space to stay up all night following an idea, or cram on that orchestra piece, work myself raw to the bone
Right.
in those kinds of situations. And I just don't have that anymore. I do think though that my creative problems predate my children and are actually in a weird way not really related to my kids and probably
Yeah.
in a good way.
Yes, yes, yeah.
My kids, the family life is a constant source of joy, even when it's like there's screaming bloody murder
Sure. Yeah.
but it is like a truly joyful thing. And but it is for me at least, it has neither been the unlocking solution, nor has it been the overwhelming problem. Before we had Gustav, people were like, "Oh, this is going to unlock this wonderful new door in your writing, and you're just going to become this
Mm,
like it's gonna like everything will become like clear, and fatherhood will change your work, and we're so excited." And no, that didn't happen. I honestly think that like I have these issues I'm working through. I'm still working through.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's a lifelong thing, although it can get easier.
I wonder, is there any like short little thing from your creative coach that you might, would you have any thoughts for me?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts for you. I think the biggest one is forgetting what the commission is. Trying to forget who it's for and when it's due or when it's supposed to be due and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal being creating a routine that you stick to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and really actually showing up at the same time every day.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's just, you just start with half hour a day. or 15 minutes. Just like at noon, I'm going to sit at my desk for 15 minutes and I'm going to open my sketchbook and I'm going to turn on the keyboard. And even if I just like go like this, that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
And just like trying to build the habit of that and just saying, I'm going to write because I'm going to write. Like not, I'm going to write because I'm going to create the most beautiful melody anyone's ever heard. But I'm just going to get something down on paper and then I'm going to look at it again later. And maybe I'm going to throw it out.
Yeah.
Then 15 minutes becomes a half hour. Then it becomes an hour. Then maybe there's 2 sessions a day. Because the other thing that I found was that writing, as crazy like as the anxiety is surrounding writing, the actual act of writing does alleviate anxiety for me. Like you feel better, right?
Yeah. Yes,
after you write.
Yeah.
So part of it is like you get into a vicious cycle where you're scared to write because you're anxious. You don't write. And because you're not getting your release of the anxiety through the writing, then you're getting more anxiety from not writing. And then it's just like builds and builds and builds and builds and snowballs. So it's sort of partially too just like giving you those 20 minutes to just like release some of your creative energy. Just to just like help your nervous system and try to just like do it for you. Or, I mean, one thing I thought, it's funny you mentioned that people were saying, oh, having kids is going to change your music. But like, sometimes I will write a piece about my cat. You know, I don't have kids, but like, I'll be like, this piece is about, like, today I'm going to write about my cat. And I just like come up with a couple little jumps and skips that are just playful and joyful. And it's like you said, it's like reconnecting with what was once fun about writing music that you lose access to with a lot of these pressures and stresses.
Yeah. No, I love that so much. It's so like I'm very like I get very like product oriented of like all of our commissions I feel like are like backward in a way because it's like you will end up with this thing.
Right.
And it's very specific. It will end up in this environment and it, you know, so and it's not like the kind of exploratory work where you're like I'm gonna start here and then find my way to the work. It feels like I know the feeling of what that violin concerto is gonna like in like the room and the people in it and like I get very obsessed with that. That then squashes the I'm just gonna like follow and be creative. You know, I've definitely had many discussions with with my publisher and various people about, you know, trying to just jump off the commission train a little bit.
Oh,
And in fact, I sort of have because basically when all this started happening a couple years ago, everything got, for me personally, everything was postponed. And then the world got postponed. But I haven't fully taken that leap. And I do wonder if it's something that I will do of like, no, we're not going to schedule any of these pieces. They're not going to have concrete ends. I'm going to start each one from here, not even really knowing what it's going to be. And then we'll figure out what it is. So it's something about that is deeply attractive. Something about it is also scary because, you know, without a deadline, maybe I won't ever write anything. But but it is true that like at a certain point for me, like my creativity got dangerously circumscribed by these like finished product things, which were like very sad. I was not like following my creativity here on the ground, but like always pointing it toward what the finished product had to be. So writing a piece about my kids or the snow falling right now, like, or like just going over there, I guess over there, and like finding something joyful is like, yes, that's what I need to do.
Yeah. I've read that you said that you need to reinvent yourself. You feel like you need to reinvent yourself with every piece. And I'm wondering, like, look, everyone loves Andrew Norman. Like you're, like what, like, I don't want to embarrass you, but like, you're doing great. You know, like people love your music. Like why, like what's why do you feel like there has to be a new Andrew with each piece? Like, why can't there just be like, here's Andrew watching the snowfall for 20 minutes or whatever, or 5 minutes? Like, here's Gustav, like, running around the living room, and like, that's enough. Like, why isn't that enough for you?
It's a really excellent point. I'm reminded of all things, a quote from Mean Girls. When Tina Fey's character, the teacher, is like, "I'm a pusher. I push people." And I think that I am a pusher of myself. And I think that somewhere along the line, I got a very deeply ingrained belief that to be an artist, or for me to be an artist, is to push myself and to become better. And part of becoming better for me is doing the things that I haven't done, and trying and exploring and pushing. And I definitely like that. Also, that gets very complicated for me too, because it's like with so much pushing, I also sometimes push beyond what is my natural impulse, and then like, is my desire to improve myself, is it actually kind of negating myself, or like not allowing me to do the things that I do or want to do or like to do? And that's very complicated. And then also, so I have that. I deeply want to be growing as an artist, and so I always want to be pushing myself. But it gets to the point where I want to push so hard that there's no foundation anymore, or there's a level of self-denial. But then there's also this weird sense that I have, that at a certain point, when I realized that people were paying attention to what I did, which was really messing with my head, like, incredibly, when I realized that there was suddenly there was like a narrative about me and my work, and like out in the world. And I was like, what, this is so weird, because it's like me trying my best to get creativity going out of my own head and just write things down. And then suddenly people were like, it made me deeply uncomfortable that people were talking about it. And like, and right. I also was like weirdly fascinated by it, but like, it made me really uncomfortable. But I also felt like I somehow I owe it, because I've been given so much in my career, and because I've been given so many opportunities, and been like had good fortune to have work and opportunities come my way at a very high level, that like I owe it to everyone to push myself and to push beyond, and to never ever become complacent in my artistry, which, as I say, this can be a good thing, but it can also be, as it has become for me, like a deeply self-hurtful thing in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I do, because I do think it's important to grow as an artist with each piece, and so I usually pick 1 to 3 things I want to do differently in the piece. So I don't try to reinvent myself afresh with each one, but I think, and I actually have a list on my wall of what am I doing in this piece that I haven't done in another piece. And maybe it's just one thing. Yeah. Because you grow over decades, like you don't have to grow you can grow a little bit with each piece.
Just one, I don't know if it's irony or if it's sad, but it's like, for me, when I go through these periods of like, oh, I don't know who I am and what I want to do, and I have to grow and I have to change everything. And then that's where that anxiety, and then often when I do this thing and I let it all out, I just actually sound quite similar to when I did that like a cycle ago. It's like when I reinvent myself, I'm always the same thing anyway. So.
Well, because you'll always be Andrew, and your voice is incredible. It really is. Aww. And I hope you are able to get to that point where you really believe that. You could write like a bad piece, and I don't even know what that would mean, and it wouldn't affect, like, people would still love it, and it wouldn't affect your career. You know what I mean? You don't believe that?
No. I mean, yes, I know what you mean, and no, I don't personally. Like, deep down, I don't believe that. In a way that I don't want to admit, but yeah, that's exactly what I have trouble with. And I think it comes down to like trusting oneself. It's like kind of like artist 101, and I will get there. I
You
will
will.
get there. And
You
I've been,
will.
because I've been there before, and
Yeah.
I know that feeling of like having these creative things and like knowing how they can kind of morph and change in piece after piece after piece, and having that creative trajectory that like is bigger than any one mission or concert or piece, and like and having a sense of oneself. Like, yeah, I remember what that feels like. I will get there again.
Yeah.
Oh man, I get lost. I do. I get
Yeah.
lost.
So what has worked for you in the past? Like what's helped you get to that breakthrough point?
There's like no one answer. When I'm stuck or in this bad space, there's like I well this is I like I often have this feeling like I can't remember how to get out of it when I'm in it. And it's like people have all sorts of helpful things to say, and I appreciate them all. But like, there's always some mental switch that happens, and then I'm out of it. And then when I go back and look, I'm like, okay, Andrew, remember what that was. So the next time this happens, you don't have to spend 2 years like in a dump. But I can't often pinpoint what it is. Sometimes it's like a collaboration, like a human kind of
Yeah.
relationship. Sometimes it's a moment of clarity that comes when I'm in a concert listening to some other music. It was often engaging with artistic production or human creation that was not music, but some other thing often sparks me going back into my musical brain. So there's that, like the classic, go to a museum, watch a movie, like read a novel. Those things have helped in the past. To be honest, it's not usually the piece itself that gets me back into the piece. And or there's also, I think, there's this moment where I become at peace with kind of ignoring, like, I don't know, the field or the world, or
Yes.
like all the voices that I perceive to be out there and what is going on. And it's like I like go through this cycle where it's like I want to stay engaged, and like as a teacher it's my job to stay engaged with the field and like know what's going on, and like keep my fingers on the pulses of this, that, and the other thing. But then, like, for my own creative sanity, I also need to kind of shut the door on that sometimes. And because, like, going back to what I said earlier, I end up triangulating myself.
Yeah.
Even like, don't even, I know I'm not supposed to, but I keep doing it anyway. Because I, as a human being, want to be engaged, especially with my own field. But then at a certain point, I also have to kind of draw a boundary, or put my work blinders on. The older I get, like the more I'm just sometimes I'm like overwhelmed, and I
Yeah.
don't like admitting that because I want to be like a good sponge. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I want to be like the person who listens and has everything in their ears, and but sometimes I can't be. I guess I'm admitting that now. I can't always be the perfect sponge. And I can't always be engaged with the world and out. Like I need to retreat to make work sometimes. A little bit of a turtle mentality. I think this is okay, but it's a difficult balance. I don't know. I don't.
Well, you have to wring out the sponge. Do you have a sponge wringing out process?
Yeah, so the first 30 seconds of play is just like me ringing out. That's exactly right. I need a sponge wringing process. That is beautiful. I'm writing that down. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be a good sponge if you don't wring it out. Otherwise, you'll just be like soppy forever.
That's the best. Literal best. I love it.
So I also thought about, this idea of like reinvention and development. Have you ever thought about just writing a piece where the goal of the piece was not actually transforming yourself as a musician, but just like transforming yourself as a person? What if the goal of this piece was about Andrew writing every day for an hour? And like what happens, just like as an experiment, what does Andrew's music sound like when he's showing up every day at noon for an hour? Like what kind of piece does that create? And that just being like an experiment for you. And what does that mean if your music is actually different? Could that inform your sense of your musicianship?
I love that idea, and have never thought of it. I've written pieces where I've dramatized this process, like the unstuck. I mean, I have like a piece called Unstuck, and
Yeah.
like the whole like creative trouble. Like I've done the writing about writing thing, but if I'm being perfectly honest with you, that has always been public facing work. You know what I mean? Like this work's going to end up in this very public sphere, and
Right.
like so it's in a way, yeah, sure, it's dramatizing a very personal thing, but it's doing it in a way that I knew was going to be public. But writing a piece where I'm like the whole concept is actually just like, well, what happens? What happens when Andrew shows up at noon every day? But like not for the world to see what Andrew does at noon, but for Andrew to see what Andrew
Yes.
does at noon, which are very different things. Yeah, but can you say that one more time so I don't lose it? It's like a
Sure.
yeah.
You know, you were talking about how when you write a piece, you want each piece to kind of, you want to challenge yourself as an artist, right, with each piece and do something differently. And so I was saying, what if you're also, with each piece, you're challenging yourself as a person, like Andrew's personal growth, with the idea that it's inherently linked to your musicianship and your artistic growth. And so what if the piece is about what happens when Andrew sits down at noon every single day and writes for an hour? What kind of music comes out of you when that's the only parameter? I talk with my coach every day about my process, and maybe that's something that you, I mean, even if you want to talk to me, like, but just like talking about the struggles of the process every single day, along with writing every single day.
That sounds beautiful and amazing. And part of me is like totally terrified about that. Other people have suggested that I try something like that. And I'm just like, it's so bad. But yeah, it sounds amazing. Sounds amazing. Oh my goodness. No, I mean, it's been so helpful. If anything, this is hitting home the idea that I do need to talk more. And I need to, like, it doesn't always have to be in public on a podcast, but I work with younger composers in a couple different capacities, and I absolutely love it. And sometimes I feel bad because like my own creative life is a wreck, but I am also helping other people. And if anything, I feel like I'm good at recognizing the seeds of my own creative anxieties in other people and helping them, like seeing that in younger composers and at least knowing how to talk about it. Because I don't know how you felt about your training, but even though I had so many wonderful teachers, but at a certain point I couldn't quite open up on the deepest level about these issues with mentors. Like we're all struggling with these things, and two, maybe I will also just say the appearance of success out in the world, this is like none of that's real. Like I know that there's this vast gulf between what happens out in public and what is going on in my head and in my life and in my trying to sort out my own creativity. And I know that's the case for everyone else. We all have to find like our own personal way through all this stuff.
That is why I so appreciate you being so open about your own struggles, because people see you, and deservedly see you as a person of success in our community. And so to hear what goes on in the studio and what goes on in your head is so important for other musicians and composers, because you're right, we do all struggle. But I think it's so important to remember too, like what's the struggle that's inherent in work and creative life, and then what's the sort of torturous, anxiety-ridden struggle that's maybe something we need help with, or we need to talk to others about. Doesn't have to be as hard.
That's absolutely right. And there are healthy creative struggles, and then there are unhealthy, personal and creative issues that we're all dealing with.
Yeah.
It. So I mean, like and also like I'm right in the middle of it, but I am here too. I'm here for you. I'm here for anyone. Like I'm here for students and anyone who's not my student, like it is hard, and we should all remember to rely on each other, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we are not we're not competing with each other, or there's none of that. None of that is real. I know I probably sound like a train wreck on an interview, but I am also here for other people to be train wrecks too. So if like I do actually, I absolutely love doing what you have done for me. I do that for other people too,
Yeah.
as much as I can. So I just want to put that out there, that that is deeply important.
No, thank you so much, Andrew. If listeners want to find you and connect with you, where should they go? Where can they hear your music?
Oh, I guess I have a website. Like I think it's andrewnormanmusic.com. I think there's an email on there that will get to me. If anyone wants to listen to my stuff, that would be where they can check that out.
As Andrew said, it is so important for us to have people whom we can talk to, who we really trust, so that we can work through all the things that are on our minds. Andrew pointed out that feeling ashamed can often block us from reaching out or seeking support. I know for me, this podcast really is a way for me to help let go of my own shame surrounding anxiety. And I believe that sharing stories is really what helps us find community and realize that we are not alone. So thank you, Andrew, for being with us today, and thank you for listening. This episode is supported by New Music USA and featured on NewMusicBox.